morning on the supply side and the financial instruments that can be given to utilities to drive this supply and protect the investment against the risk. And then Julian took the other side on seeing how the policies and the pricing policies can affect the consumer behavior. And Manuel now, well, I don't know if you really put everything together, but definitely you are approaching the problem from an integrated perspective, putting in evidence the role of the macroeconomic models. And so, thanks.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Well, thank you to the organizer and for the opportunity. It's a pleasure for me to be here and have the opportunity to discuss with you about the blended basis issue of health economics or health economic modeling. Initially, I thought it was more, well, my presentation more oriented like for a summer course, but now I see that the faces, the people who are here, we have some of the best experts in the world in hydroeconomic modeling. So probably for some of you, some of the things I will present are basic thing on hydroeconomy, but I will have to go through all these for the general audience of the course. So, well, I'm Manuel Pulido Velázquez. I'm an associate professor from the Technical University of Valencia, Spain, and I'm also senior researcher at IAMA. And IAMA is the Research Institute for Water and Environmental Engineering of UPV. That was founded in 2001, and it has around 100 researchers, including university professors, university faculty, and research staff, and forming a very multidisciplinary research center on water, with the main purpose of promoting scientific research, advanced teaching and technical consulting on topics related to water, considered both a resource and supporters of the biosphere, with the integration of research from different disciplines in a very multidisciplinary approach. And we want to become a reference center at the national and international level on these issues. And our research center is including 10 different research groups that are covering the main aspect of the cycle of water in both natural and engineered systems. Actually, I'm in the water resources engineering group, and my research team is mainly dealing with the use of hydrology, system analysis techniques, economics, for supporting water resources planning and management in an integrated way. So this is an outline of my talk. I will first start with introduction, the role of economics in water resources planning and management. Then I'll focus on hydroeconomic models. For hydroeconomic models, the requirement is the economic characterization of water demands. So I will talk a little bit on this, and more particularly on urban water demands. Then I will present some application of hydroeconomic models to a broad range of issues related to water resources planning and management, and finally limitations, challenges, and conclusions. So let's first talk about the context and to explain also the need of integrated modeling of demand and supply. So I would like to start with a question for the audience. So what is, in your opinion, the most undervalued natural resource and underpriced service? It is clear that water is often undervalued and is often underpriced, and we are often unaware of the total economic value of water resources. And this is often leading to the mismanagement of water resources, and that water resources are increasingly under threat of pollution and inflation worldwide. So, what can we offer from our scientific community on water science and policy in order to confront the challenge and this concern about the sustainability of future water management? By the way, this figure is taken from one of the cover of The Economist, about challenge ahead. So we need to produce innovation in a sense that is really helping to a more sustainable management of water resources, especially in a context in which we have a high rate of population growth. As you know, in 2011 we reached the figure of 7,000 million people in the world, and it is true that population aging is probably reducing the rate of population growth, as discussed in the paper of Nature from which I took this figure. But it's also true that most of the population growth is already happening in developing countries, which are already suffering from water stress in Africa and in Asia, and also with increasing urbanization and fast growth of megacities. So these challenges we have to deal with. But also, if you look at this map of global water availability, we see that per capita water availability is lower, mainly in those areas with the highest population growth. Then, we have to face the challenge also of increasing demand of water for agriculture. That is the main water use in the world, around 75%, but also the increase in urban water use and the increase in industrial water supply. On the other hand, we have energy, the famous water energy nexus, and we know that water use is usually energy intensive, and on the other hand, energy sources need a stable water supply. And then we have the environment, and there is this Millennium Assessment Report saying that in the last 50 years, ecosystem has changed more than in any previous period. So all these are challenges we have to face at the global scale, but also, for example, I would like to talk a little bit about Spain. I will mention also climate change, of course. So we have also to deal with uncertainty on future water availability because of climate change due to global warming. And we don't need a second opinion on this, do we? But it's a global scale, but talking about Spain in particular, Spain is one of the most arid countries in the European Union. And it's the first country in the irrigated area. We have 3.4 million hectares of irrigated area in Spain, and a very uneven distribution of water resources. So we have a very humid north, and then the central, the eastern, and the south part is arid or semi-arid. So often in Spain we have that the demand is higher where the water availability is lower, as it happens in California and in other regions in the world. And so we have some places and regions in which we have what we call a structural water deficit, in which water demand is well in excess of available water supply. So for that's another features of water management in Spain. So we have a long tradition of river basin management. We have several important interbasin water transfers, high water reuse, and a high social sensitivity to water issues, and it happens also in other places in the world. But so to tackle these structural water deficits, we have two main options. As we have the traditional response to the increase in water demand has been to develop additional water supply, making new infrastructure like new dams, like desalination plants, interbasin transfer, etc. But this is much more costly nowadays than in the past, and this is increasing the potential of demand management options. We have economic instruments, we have water conservation, okay? So we have different strategies that can be implemented. So finally, the challenge nowadays is to find what is the optimal combination, the optimal portfolio, to balance supply and demand, considering both supply enhancement and demand management strategies at the same time, and with different objectives. It is clear that under the context of growing scarcity and limited resources, we need to find economically efficient solutions. But it's also true that we need to find socially acceptable solutions, no? In order to implement them successfully. We need to address issues like equity, like public participation in the planning process, like cooperation of the different agents and different institutions involved, etc. On the other hand, we need to consider environmental sustainability. So we need to address externalities and environmental impacts of the different alternatives. And finally, we have the uncertainty that we mentioned before, uncertainty of future resources and demand, so we need to find robust, flexible, and robust solutions. So this is the challenge we have, to find this optimal combination under all these criteria. So in this context of multi-objective problems, with many alternatives, with high uncertainty, with high impact and cost of the decisions, we really need to use integrated computer models in order to help us and to assist in decision making for the design and for the management of water resources systems. Water resources management involves influencing and improving the interaction between three main subsystems. No? So we have the natural system, the socio-economic system, and the legal institutional one. So hydroeconomic models has the advantage of explicitly representing those interactions. Well, this is what we try when we build these kind of models. So the combination of economic engineering and environmental aspects of water resources management can produce results that are more relevant for decision, for policy making. Well, so in this context, what is the role of economics in water resources management? No? So we face increasing water scarcity in many regions, water quality problems, growing environmental concerns and competition. And on the other hand, for the supply side, we have inelastic supply for new sources because the best sources are already in use. So there is clearly need for economically efficient water allocation and management. On the other hand, we have the complexity of water management problems we mentioned before, multiple objectives, many alternatives, many stakeholders, etc. So economics can help to simplify the problem. This is a very complex problem, of course, but can help to simplify the problem by using a common unit, that in this case is money, and allowing to assess the different trade-off and opportunity costs in solving the different water conflicts. Well, as Jaylan has mentioned many times, and Greg, there is a long history of cooperation between economics and engineering in many different issues of water resources planning and management. And actually, one of the earliest definitions of economic demand curve was for urban water supply and was given by Jules Dupuit, the famous French hydraulic engineer, who also proposed the concept of consumer surplus when analyzing the optimal capacity of a canal. So there is a long list of potential applications of economics to water resources management, water demand estimation and forecast. I think we are going to see some presentation about this. Multi-purpose water resources development, water management and allocation decisions, the design and the assessment of economic policy instruments. I will talk later about this, and also policy analysis. Well, many of you know all these famous landmarks on the development of hydroeconomic, the use of economics and hydroeconomic modeling in water resource management, like for example the requirement of the cost-benefit analysis for the Flood Control Act in the United States. Of course, a famous Harvard Water Program in which a very multidisciplinary team pioneered the application of system analysis techniques to water management. And then we have some of the first application of hydroeconomic modeling in the 60s and 70s in semi-arid regions. So we have the Samuelson paper by Sam Howitt, Buchangian, etc. Well, I would like to refer now in Europe to the Water Framework Directive, because the Water Framework Directive has formalized the increasing role of economics in water policy. And the main goal of the European Directive is this: to reach the good status of water bodies. And one of the key novelties of the European Directive is that this is asking for the application of economic principles and instruments for this purpose. Actually, the directive calls for the application of economic principles, like, for example, the polluter pays principle, economic tools and economic methods, like cost-effectiveness analysis for the selection of the program of measures to meet this environmental objective. And also we use cost-benefit analysis mainly to justify potential exemptions to meeting those goals. But also, this is very important, the directive is supporting the use of economic instruments like new water pricing policy. And in the sense that using prices not only for cost recovery, not only for financial purposes, but using prices also as economic instruments for demand management and for promoting an efficient water use. The directive is asking for cost recovery for not only financial costs, but also for environmental and resource costs. And the definition and calculation of these two terms, environmental and resource costs, is still a challenge. So in this context, with all these requirements, the use of integrated basin management model can really support and be very important in all the process of the implementation of the Water Framework Directive. And we wrote with JLAN and other people in 2007 a paper reviewing some of these ideas. Well, this is the context of the role of economics. So we need to integrate economics, that's clear. So let's try to do that using hydroeconomic models. And this is a classic representation of the main elements of hydroeconomic model. So as inputs we have the following: the topology of the system, the hydrology, surface and water, also the interaction, economic characterization of the demands and the operating cost, the infrastructure of the system, and in this case this is usually done using lower and upper bound constraints, representing different infrastructure operational capacity restrictions, and we might have also institutional and environmental constraints. So these are the inputs that we use in hydroeconomic models, and then we use either simulation or optimization models. And this is important because some people, I think, tend to think that hydroeconomic models are only optimization models using a normative approach, but that's not always the case. And I think there is some room for simulation approaches on this. And as output, we will get water management results in the system. So we will get storage, flow, deliveries, reliability. We will get also economic results. We will get benefits. We will get scarcity cost. We will get shadow values representing, for example, the marginal value of water at different locations in the system, or representing, for example, the marginal value of capacity constraints in a system. So let's go quickly through these elements. So we have a flow network with nodes and links. This is the topology of the system. This is for one application we did for the Juzgar River Basin. We have the hydrology, usually represented using long time series of the stream flow, based on either historical or synthetic time series, and usually mass balance and the different nodes in the system. And we often use a monthly time step, avoiding the necessity of including, for example, the flow routine equation with lower time step. For example, this is the inflow time series, the location of the inflow time series we use for the Júcar river basin for representing the surface hydrology. And then we have the challenge of groundwater. And in river basin like the Júcar river basin, with 70% of the stream flow is due to groundwater upflow, it's really crucial to represent groundwater and stream aquifer interaction. So there are very different approaches that you can use with a different level of detail, going from very simplified approaches like land parameter models or analytical solutions to more precise parameter distributed numerical models representing groundwater flow and groundwater heads, and the integration of these numerical solutions into hydroeconomic models is usually done through different techniques, like for example response matrices or eigenvalue method that we often use. And finally, we need to represent the stream aquifer interaction. We have also developed some methods to represent this using simple but accurate approaches. But in any case, it is essential to use efficient method for representing groundwater and stream aquifer interaction in hydroeconomic models, especially when dealing with large complex systems, like for example this one. So we have 28 reservoir, 26 aquifer, large number of canals and demands. So you need if you have a complex system, you need efficient methods for that. Well, the economic characterization of the system is done through economic benefit functions for the different uses in the basin and water supply operating costs. So the economic characterization for the characterization of economic value of water for different uses is done through demand curve, representing the relationship between the marginal value of water and water deliveries. And the use of demand curves allow us to calculate a scarcity cost, and this is defined as the foregone benefits when water deliveries are below the target demand. So just by integrating the equation of the demand curve, we can develop an anti-function relating scarcity cost and water supply, and this is a clear added value of hydroeconomic models. Okay, so let's try to classify hydroeconomic models. So the first classification for me will be between simulation and optimization approach. Basically, in simulation approach, the system is managed according to a priori operating rules. These operating rules can either represent the current modus operandi of the system or any other alternative. But in optimization, what we often do is to manage the system in order to maximize the net economic benefit of water use in the system. Okay? So here we adopt a normative approach, while here is correspond to usually a more positive approach, positive valuation. But we often use this in a combined way. So sometimes it's worth to use optimization for a first insight and then simulation for refining the results in a more realistic way, in a different approach. So models, hydroeconomic models can be developed ad hoc for a specific system, or we can also resort to fancy decision support tools. There are also pre-processing tools, like for example Hydro Platform, led by Julian and his team, and it's an open source platform for network systems that facilitates all the input, storage, display, and export model data, and many other capabilities that new versions are being developed now for Hydro Platform. And one example of a successful decision support system that has been developed by my colleague Joaquin Andreu starting in the 90s in Valencia is AquaTool, that now allows to integrate all these components, also partially integration of economics. And for example, this is a representation of the whole water resources system for Spain that was done for studying potential water transfers. But this tool has been used widely by different water agencies in order to develop the river basin plans in all the regions in Spain. In our research team at UPB, we have developed also several methods and tools, several generic hydroeconomic decision support tools for different purposes, using simulation approaches, using economic optimization, and using stochastic approaches like ESDP in order to avoid the issue of the perfect foresight or the classic deterministic optimization. And we have applied this to different cases. I will show some cases and examples, but for example, in the Júcar River Basin, we have applied a combined use of optimization and simulation to simulate different policies and different economic instruments. Well, we published with Jay, Julian, David, so we have almost all the co-authors around. we published a paper a review paper in 2009 listing some application of hydroeconomic models, but the field of hydroeconomic models has grown and evolved quickly after that, even if it was published only 6 years ago. And we have a key issue is the economic characterization of water demands. So this is a challenge. When we work in hydroeconomic models, then we say, okay, where are the demands? No, as also Julian said in his talk. So first, we need to consider that economically there are many differences depending on if we are referring to non-productive or to productive water uses. So non-productive uses, for example, residential, recreation, and environmental uses. In those cases, water is a final good, and the users are consumers. So the demand will depend on the consumer's tastes and preferences, and water is providing a direct utility to the consumers who are willing to pay a certain amount of money for that. So willingness to pay is key. And the main assessment method are econometric and market valuation techniques. Not only that, I will show some more examples. But on the other hand, we have productive uses as water for agriculture, for industry, or for urban commercial uses, or for hydropower. In all these cases, water is an intermediate good that is an input in a production process. So it's an input in a derived demand of a final good. So we have to apply a different economic theory. This is production theory, and the economic value of water will depend on the residual value of water over the final products. And this is depending on the technology, the efficiency and the cost, the effectiveness, the efficiency of the technology and the cost, and the final demand, the demand of the final products. So we use different assessment methods. We use production function, we use mathematical parameters, and I will show quickly some example of that. So when talking about productive uses of water, a key step is to develop what we call the production function. For example, for irrigated agriculture, we did this here for corn in Spain, in Mancha Oriental. So we developed production function relating the water applied with the crop yield. Okay? This can be done using control experiments, using statistics, using statistical regression of experimental data, or using agronomic simulation models. This is what we did here using EPIC, in this case for corn production. Well, there is a very extensive literature on mathematical parameter techniques to try to represent farmers' decision either at the farm or at the irrigation district scale. Most of the applications were initially profit maximization models. Then Richard Howitt published a very famous paper in 1995 about the use of PMP, and basically is calibrating the optimization model to perfectly reproduce the observed farmers' decisions. In our case, in studies we done in Spain, we found that at least the traditional profit maximization models were far from reproducing the actual farmer decisions. So we decided to use a multi-criteria approach. And basically we developed a simulation tool that uses economic theory and mathematical programming to try to reveal the implicit multi-attribute utility function that is behind the profit decisions. So this multi-criteria approach, we use a Cobb-Douglas, because this makes sense in economic theory, a Cobb-Douglas utility function in which we represent three main criteria, that is profit maximization, risk aversion, and also other criteria like minimization of complexity, like minimizing, for example, the working load, the working force that you have. And we use, to calibrate this utility function, we use economic theory. So we use the production probability frontier and the observed decision that is close to this frontier. So this is under review now in American Journal of Agricultural Economics, let's see. But once the utility function is calibrated, it becomes a powerful tool for assessing the impact of different policy scenarios. Like for example, water pricing changes, subsidies decoupling, technology change, irrigation technologies changes or substitution. Well, this is for productive uses of agriculture. So let's go back to urban water demand. And we all know that urban water use consists of residential, indoor and outdoor uses, small industry supply, public and municipal uses, and finally commercial uses. And those uses under the same umbrella of urban water demand, they have very different behavior, very different economic characterization. Urban demand, this is probably very general, but we all know that urban demand is the most demanding use. They need high water quality, they need high supply reliability. In Spain, the legal requirement now for the river basin plants is the monthly deficit has to be lower than 10% monthly demand. So you have to ensure this using historical time series that you can supply in these conditions. The time distribution of the demand is more or less uniform. It depends, not of course in touristic zones or in other places, and of course there is higher variability. Return flows are usually point and more or less constant over time, so it's highly suitable for wastewater reuse. And in Spain, also in the Valencia region especially, we have a really high reuse that is close to 50% of urban wastewater is reused, direct reuse in the system. And then finally, from an economic point of view, how is urban demand? Urban demand is a use with a high supply cost, but also with a low opportunity cost. If we consider that the opportunity cost of supply for urban demand is probably the benefit for one, in our case, for irrigation. So comparing in this sense. Also, from an economic point of view, the urban demand is negative, inelastic, usually inelastic, and the income elasticity is positive, so it's a normal good, what it means higher consumption with higher income. And I will go quickly through some common myths on urban water demands. So first, the first common myth is water is a necessity. So water is different to other economic goods because it's unique, it's something for life, and so it can be treated in an economic way. But the response to this is that actually the life requirements are only a few liters per day, and the other uses are decisions. No? We want to have more gardens, we have swimming pool, we have many other things, we have commercial uses, we have industry, we have other things. The other myth is the myth of per capita water use. So the future water demand will be just the projected population times the projected per capita use. I think there is going to be a couple of talks about forecasting urban demand, so talk a lot about this, but this is a too limited account of many other factors that are affecting the future demand, like socioeconomic factors, geographic factors, climatic factors, other things. Actually, I brought a list of some factors affecting water use, as climate, as urban configuration, as income. We said that it's a normal route, water price, the season of the year. So in general, we can say that urban consumption is greater with a warmer climate during the summer in a high income area and with low population density. So all these factors are affecting the total demand. The third common myth is that water uses do not respond to price. This is a very common myth on urban water demand. Some people will say that water is a question of necessity, it's a matter of habits, so people will never change their habits. Some other people will say that the water bill represents just a small percentage of the household budget and is not significant to change the behavior. Okay? But the response to this is that all empirical studies show that water use does in fact respond to changes in prices. The whole literature and the whole empirical studies, they say that. It is true that indoor demand is quite inelastic, no substitution, but outdoor demand can be quite elastic. Or can be more, can be inelastic, but in any case, inelastic doesn't mean no reaction to price. Okay, that's also important. Can be also a misunderstanding. And also, the price demand elasticity is supposed to increase with price. So it depends on the range of price. If you go to a really high price, there will be more reaction and more changes to this effect. For the fourth myth, I'm not going to talk more about this because Greg did a wonderful job on this. But the water conservation will lead to negative financial impact on water supply analysis. No? So there is the effect of lower revenues that was mentioned before. There is also the effect on operating costs and the effect on delaying, Julie mentioned also that, delaying the cost of future facilities. This is a benefit, the other is a cost, and also a key issue is use the correct charges. Okay, so we have the urban water demand. We try to discuss the myth on this, and now let's see the approaches to obtain what we need, the economic demand curve. So we have econometric analysis is a classic approach. Julian also talked about meta-analysis using published prior studies of water demand in different regions and different space and different regions and different time, and then using statistics for that. We had the residual imputation. This is a very theoretical method, but then it's only provide a single value, so it's limited for our purpose. But we use, this is the main method we use in hydroeconomic modeling, the point expansion method, that has been used in the Calvin model applications in California, for example. And I will mention this, but this is more marginal, and I will explain on this a little bit. So, well, econometric analysis, this is simply, we postulate a certain functional form for the study. So we assume that there is a function relating water with different factors and random components. We take data from time series at different locations, what economists call the panel data. We feed the parameters, we analyze the Gunnerov fields, of course, and then we try to interpret the findings. So, for example, this is done There have been a study in Valencia region, an econometric study of urban demand using residential demand, using time series from different municipalities, and they found that the price variable was statistically significant and with the price elasticity coefficient. This is the magic number we are using now in our point expansion methods, no? The price elasticity of urban demand obtained by econometric analysis. But often econometric studies have the problem of the need of important set of data for this. So we use often a very simplified version in hydroeconomic model that we call the point expansion method. Basically, we need a price consumption, so we need a point plus econometric estimation of price elasticity, and we fit a constant price elasticity curve. So this is what we done, for example, in the Júcar Basin with the Valencia study, and the advantage is that it's very easy to apply, and you obtain the whole demand function. But it is true that there is no guarantee that there is going to be a constant price elasticity over different ranges of prices, and we can expect probably important deviation when we are far from what is the known point. Okay, and non-market valuation is usually used in other applications in economics. They use this for environmental goods or to value recreational activities or sites. But it has been used in urban water demand, especially for the reliability, to value the reliability of urban water supply. So there was this well-known study by Griffin and Mender, but we did one study in the European projects in which we recently published two papers on this, assessing the trade-off between household supply reliability and environmental water status in the context of the European Water Framework Directive. That was done using a choice experiment for different cases across Europe, and we also tested the transferability of the benefit using techniques of benefit transfer. This is other kind of techniques that is similar in this purpose to data analysis. So we try to use existing data and try to transfer the benefit to other sites. And math programming is not really a tool for developing demand curve, human demand curve, but has been used as an indirect method for estimating the cost of urban water scarcity by calculating the least cost combination of water conservation measures. No? So this has been done by Jelan in several papers, Rosenberg, and these water conservation auctions in urban, in residential water use, basically include, well, Jay is going to talk about this tomorrow, so I can skip this quickly, and so I can save some time. But what I was going to mention is that you can use this to say a proxy of urban water demand, and this was done for California, for 10 different water agencies in California, in the research of Alvar Escrivá. And so you can have a proxy, and also some proxy of water and energy, in case you consider water and water-related energy, that is also very important in the household. I think it was 6% of electricity and 50% of natural gas in California is used for heating the water. No? And so we can consider them as complementary good and analyze elasticities. Okay, so this is the economics behind the economic model. So I will just very quickly show some example to illustrate the application of economic models taken from the research studies in which I have participated. So for example, this is an old study, so planning and management economic value of new infrastructure and operation. So first, I will start with a study we did long ago in California, using Calvin, and that was to analyze the optimal conjunctive use and groundwater bank in California in a situation in which there were expectations of reduced water imports in Southern California, in which 70% of water supply is coming from outside, and also dealing with climate change issues. No? So we developed a detailed hydroeconomic model of Southern California. This is a schematic of the system, so you can see the spatial complexity of the model with the extensive database behind. And the results show that the system has a significant adaptation capacity, to reduce imports and to adapt to climate change, even to long-term climate change conditions. But this is done through better operation of the system, including artificial recharge facilities that we study, and significant transfer, although with a cost. And we found that the combination was perfect, because project use was adding operational flexibility to water transfers, and on the other hand, transfers were providing allocation flexibility to better use project use. So it was a good combination for solving the future issues. But also, the results were showing significant benefits of expanding certain conveyance and storage facilities in California. So we studied this reservoir capacity expansion of the shadow values of capacity constraint in different systems. We also did a study in Spain for the ADRA Campo de Dalías and the optimal conjunct use operation. This is a system which is very profitable, very productive irrigated agriculture and the greenhouses. So the most profitable in Europe, probably. So they're exporting high-value crops to all Europe, and all this is done mainly using groundwater in coastal aquifer with problem of seawater intrusion. So then we wanted to integrate this groundwater management issue into a hydroeconomic model. And for that purpose, we use a distributive model of other aquifer using eigenvalue techniques and using different controlling variables like groundwater heads, storage, and outflow to the sea to control seawater intrusion with a dynamic pumping cost. So we found that both the base case and the economic optimization were leading to situations with unsustainable situations. So we need to, and we also found that by changing the operation of the system and by changing the location of certain wells in the system, it was possible to find solutions that were able to control seawater intrusion and at the same time to reduce scarcity costs in the system. We also did another study in 2008 that we were lucky that was published in PNAS. That was on water conservation in agriculture. We found some, let's say, empirical evidence and some economic insight to an issue that was already controversial. There were some huge investments in water conservation in irrigation, in modernization of irrigation techniques and systems, but it was not clear that it was really reducing water use in the system and also producing, so the policies of conservation were actually increasing consumption, and we would try to find using economics and using hydroeconomic model, physical economic evidence, why it was happening in the system. Another study of hydroeconomic model was about the benefit of cooperation. We applied this to a complex and controversial basin as the Tigris and Euphrates region in a transboundary basin in which riparian countries need to address to agree on how to share the resources. So hydroeconomic model can also provide some information to the explanation of this. Well, I mentioned also economic instrument at the beginning of the talk. So some of the works we have done on this, we have been studying the optimal control of groundwater pollution using fertilizer quotas, basically focusing on nitrate, using fertilizer quota, fertilizer taxes or taxes, pricing, policies, and water markets. So very quickly, some ideas of these results we've got there. So nitrate is the main pollutant of groundwater in Europe and I think almost everywhere. And the European directive is looking for cost-effectiveness approaches to reach a good status on groundwater bodies. And there are two main approaches, fertilizer quotas and fertilizer taxes, and there are some interest in Europe, some pilot cases in application of taxes on this. So we developed a health economic model to find the economically optimal fertilizer application that minimize agricultural losses, because that's the cost of reducing fertilizer use for crops, while meeting the environmental constraints, the groundwater nitrate concentration in the aquifer. So that was also the key challenge. No? So how to change, how to make how to couple mud flow and T3D, so the model for groundwater flow and transport, with the agronomic simulation of crop yield and nutrient leaching into a management model. So that was the process. And for the technical problem of how to, because what you can control is the emissions of nitrogen, but the policy target is the pollutant concentration in the wells. So you need to relate both in order to find management alternative. No? So we solved this using concentration response matrices, including MOFLO and T3D. So with this way, you can simulate for different scenarios what is evolution in different control wells, the evolution of nitrogen concentration, and we tested different quotas and pricing policies for fertilizers in order to solve this problem, including also an stochastic analysis to analyze the trade-off between reliability and net benefits. And then almost the last application is scarcity pricing. Julian explained the concept. We've been working for a while on efficient scarcity-based water pricing. As I mentioned, for using the prices not only for cost recovery as a financial instrument, but also for demand management option. And this is by including the opportunity cost of water use related to water scarcity. So we developed an approach that is based on calculating the marginal value of water at the main reservoirs in the system. And this is a graph showing the time series of storage versus marginal value of water. So you can see that when the storage is high, the marginal value is low, and when the storage is low in a drought, the marginal value of water is of course very high. So we came up with the idea of grouping the marginal value for different storage ranges, and then use this to develop a step pricing scale depending on the storage. So it says this is a priori pricing policy, so it's known by everybody. So you don't change the rule every time. So it's not dynamic pricing that you are changing the price. You know the price, and the price will depend on water availability all the time. And we can use this using simulation economic models. Okay, so we develop this and we simulate the effect on the water pricing policy. Now we are working on introducing the effect on utility revenues, as I mentioned before, because this has implication on the utility revenues. So we simulated these pricing policies to reduce water scarcity costs during droughts, and we found very interesting results. And also we compared these pricing policies with water markets. Finally, the last application we are working now is impact and adaptation to climate change. We've been working on this for the Júcar Basin in a while, and now for the whole river basin. For the Júcar Basin, we just submitted a paper on this with a climate change adaptation strategy. We simulated the impact of climate change on water resources in the Júcar River Basin, considering also demand changes, so it's a global change. We end up with a simulation of different reservoir storage, and the simulation you can see the growing of water scarcity costs for the short, medium, and long-term scenarios in business as usual way. But if you test different adaptation strategies, we significantly reduce this water scarcity cost. For example, with demand management options, remember what we said of the mix, the portfolio mix, of different system management options. And finally, recently, in the thesis of Quarantine, we co-advised with my colleague Janelle Rinaldo from VIGN, climate change adaptation in the French basin. We tried this, what I presented at the beginning, to try to deal with all these issues in climate change adaptation. So economic efficiency, at the same time social acceptability, environmental sustainability, and robustness. How did we do that? Well, we took a top-down meets bottom-up approach. Our bottom-up approach was based on a scenario building workshop with the stakeholders. We were lucky that Gian Daniel was very connected to the local stakeholders, and we were able to organize many meetings with them. We developed water demand models, and we identify adaptation measures with economic and technical characterization. The top-down approach, you will know this typical change, global scenarios, downscaling, regional, local, and hydrological simulation. So we meet them with the adaptation strategy to find, and our approach was a bit different to the classical one. So we find the least cost portfolio first, and then we discuss what is the best way to negotiate the implementation of this least cost portfolio, sharing the cost between the different stakeholders. So that was our approach. So we found these risk cost portfolios, and at the same time we identified least regret portfolio with the climate check because of the robustness requirement. But then we had the issue of how to cooperate. Because one of the critics on high economic models, well, we often seem to assume that we have a perfect cooperation among users. So here we tested different ways of sharing the cost with different approaches. One was game theory, cooperative game theory. The other one was social justice theory. Because the definition of equity, as you know, is not a single standard definition, and there are many ways of integrating this. So these are the solutions. Least cost portfolio coming from optimization tools, including water conservation measure in urban and agriculture, and also supply auctions, a climate check with different scenarios, and then a cost allocation issues using different approaches. So finally, as conclusions, this is a very quick overview of hydroeconomic models with many limitations. Yes. First, to say that hydroeconomic models are much more than just economic optimization. Not only this, we not always assume profit maximization behavior. We use simulation as well to simulate the consequences of different infrastructure, design, different policies, etc. We combine them, many applications, even simple hydroeconomic model, despite the limitation, I think can contribute to integrated understanding and significant policy impact insights. So this is important. You will never find out the solution for anything. This is just a tool to give you some advice and some insights. We need some hydrology and economic behind if we want to produce realistic results. So it's essential to do a multidisciplinary approach, working together with economists in developing demand function and all this analysis. And there are some new trends, some of them will be presented here in the workshop, like agent-based modeling, incorporating non-economic drivers also in the analysis, in the representation of individual behavior, and also multi-criteria approaches that try to bring also non-economic issues, although nowadays economics is able to represent many different issues with different approaches. And that's it. Any question? No? Okay. Yes.
What's next?
What's next?
Yeah, so you've laid out sort of a very big picture of hydroeconomic modeling. What are some of the big challenges that you see for the field and directions that are promising?
Well, I think some of the challenges are first to better represent the behavior of the different agents. That's important, but not forgetting that in any case we are just using models. Because in my view, the models also represent, if you use the model with a normative intention, then you need also to not to forget economic optimization as providing insight for ideas for improving your system. This is not giving you the positive, realistic evaluation, but can give you some ideas on where to move. No? So, yeah, we're working on representative behavior, working on also on issues like economic instrument and cost, demand management options that sometimes are underrepresented in hydroeconomic models. In my opinion, there is a long way to do with with what economic and financial issues, as Greg mentioned. So I think it's really a very important field. And in my view, I mean, probably you can give us more ideas on this, no? But in my view, that there is many issues in water resources management in which we can still do many things with hydroeconomic modeling that has been very limited and explored. No? So, for example, the issues smart meters that is focused on this workshop can open also the field when we understand better the uses and the behavior of the users in order to better represent those all this interaction. Yes, yes.
Could you talk more about how you did the model integration or model coupling of like groundwater components with surface water and that aspect?
Yeah, we did. That was in my PhD thesis research. Like we're going to go, we work on using numerical water models and how to integrate them in hydroeconomic models using eigenvalues techniques. And the wonderful thing of these techniques is that you have an explicit state equation representing the selective control variables that you want to use. So what I mentioned, for example, in the case for the Adra basin, I represented the aquifer, and I said that we were using as control variables, we were using the groundwater heads, the outflow, and storage. So the powerful thing with eigenvalue techniques is that you can select only those variables that you want to use, and you don't need to calculate all the other variables. If you try to couple a finite difference model, as some people have done in integration of in conjunctive use model, you have to calculate everything, because the numerical resolution is just by calculating everything by interaction. This you don't need to interact. You calculate in your model only selective variables you want to use, because it's when you have a really large, complex groundwater management model, you are not interested in the result for each single cell of the system. You are not, for decision making, you are not looking at each result. You are looking to selective results that are in your interest. No? So you don't lose accuracy of the results, but you are able to do the calculation in a more efficient way. So that's the powerful thing. Like I can give you more references on this.
So essentially, that's creating a meta model, or
no, it's pre-processing and calculating some matrices that are representing the value behavior of the response of the aquifer, and then you include this in your model, and you are fully representing the same result that the whole thing. So I think it's quite effective to.
Okay, thanks a lot, Manuel. I think we have to keep the schedule and to